All right, folks. So after a busy weekend for myself, finally got a chance here on Sunday to go check out Backrooms. If you don't know, this is a movie that is directed by Kane Parsons. He is another one of these young, up-and-coming YouTube stars that have gravitated towards the horror genre and who are crushing it for the most part. Sorry, Chris Stuckman. So Backrooms is based on, initially it was based on these creepypastas back in the day, which, if you don't know, were just like scary, unsettling images and like these scary stories that people told to each other on the internet. So it started as like these creepypastas of people just taking pictures of like these unsettling environments, like these brightly lit back corridors of like retail locations of just empty furniture, empty racks all over, and there was just something so unsettling about that environment. So Kane Parsons basically took that premise and he made an entire like sprawling YouTube series about the back rooms, and I believe there's like 3+ hours of that content on his YouTube channel. So that's where this all came from, just a couple creepypastas back in the 90s turned into like a mini YouTube series that eventually now got a big budget and a full theatrical release. And this movie is already crushing in the box office. I think it made like 81 million this opening weekend. So the movie's doing fantastic. So basically you have this guy he's running this furniture store that is not doing great business-wise. He has a ton of issues in his personal life. He's obviously pretty dependent on alcohol to get through his days. Him and his wife have recently broken up, and she has kicked him out of the house that he pays for, a big theme of this movie. So you have this struggling furniture salesman who owns the store. You learn that he is sleeping in a bed inside the store itself. And he's clearly struggling, mental health-wise, alcohol dependency, dealing with his divorce in a very unhealthy way. Alcohol is never the answer to coping. So you have this guy who's struggling, and he is going to this therapist, Mary. And this is kind of a dual protagonist kind of story. What starts as his story eventually develops more into Mary's story. So you have these two people that are both dealing with some stuff. You have a lot of flashbacks from her point of view about her mother, who was very mentally sick. She was projecting that onto her daughter, not letting her leave the house. Clearly, the woman was struggling with mental health. She put these projections onto her daughter. Her daughter grew up to be a therapist, as a lot of people do that have rough childhoods. Checks out. And you have this man, Clark, the owner of the furniture store, who, they're having electrical issues at the store. So he's downstairs, he's messing with the fuse box again and again and again, until one night he eventually sees a little crack in the wall when he's downstairs. It's like, if you stand over here, can't see it. If you stand in just the right spot, you can see a little slit of light coming through it. So, he goes over to the wall, puts his hand through it, and like a Doctor Strange portal, he goes to the other side, and this is where we see the back rooms. And I think when this movie is at its absolute best, I think is during the first half of the film, when he's kind of wandering the back rooms. Like, before we have an answer for what the hell this place is, like whether it's an extension of his building, whether it's some government underground bunker, whether it's a parallel dimension. The movie is at its absolute best when we are kind of discovering with our protagonist what the hell this area is. Because there's some elements that seem like it's a normal office building, it's a normal space, but then there are these weird abstract things happening. Almost puts me in mind of like, for any fellow gamers, Expedition 33 from last year. Game of the year, by the way. Yeah, anyone that was a fan of that game, it's kind of like when you're in Paris, and a part of it seems like it's set in reality, but there's also weird, like, rocks in the sky, and things happening that seem surreal, almost seem like it's not humanly possible, it's so abstract. And that's what the Backrooms is. Like, when he is going room to room, exploring all these different weird-ass rooms with, like, furniture piles and, like, chairs and shoes kind of, like, halfway through the floor, that is when the movie is at its absolute creepiest. this movie is more about the suspense than the outright horror. Because you're going to spend a lot of this movie just walking around, right? And for some people, that's going to be too slow of a burn. For me, that's when the movie was hitting. Like when you're going into each room and you're checking around the corners, not knowing what you're going to see. The fear of the unknown is something that is universally terrifying. This movie does that great. Another thing I like is that you see glimpses, you see peeks around the corner, but you don't really outright see these creatures until the back half of the movie where it falls off. But yeah, that's everything I loved about the movie. You know, there were some good performances, but the abstract nature of the Backrooms was awesome. I wanted to see his descent into madness a little bit more than just like the cut from his story to Mary's and just like fast forwarding a set amount of time. I really think the movie would have benefited more by spending more time with Clark and just seeing his madness unfold. Another thing I really like about the movie is I think the camera work is fascinating. The camera work definitely keeps you engaged. Just the framing of so many shots of people through the doorways, beautiful. Like if you think of those barbarian shots of her like around that, you know, that basement, a lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of the point of view stuff was really well done as well. I was actually impressed how much I like the found footage elements of this movie. If you know my channel, if you know me from my podcast, found footage really is not my bag. It's just not a subgenre of horror that I gravitate towards a lot, and it worked really well here. I think they did a lot better with it here than they did in Shelby Oaks. Again, sorry, Stuckman, I don't know why I'm taking so many shots here, but the found footage stuff, surprisingly, I really liked. The setup of this movie, the premise of this movie was fascinating. I was in. Even if the first half some people would say is a bit of a slow burn, that's all the best stuff to me. And then the other positive in this movie that, I mean, has to be mentioned is just the set pieces and the environment. Like, I know there's been a couple, telltale versions of this. Like, I know they did one in American Horror Stories. They did, like, a Backrooms thing. But that completely missed the point of Backrooms because they chose to go for like this dim lighting to make it more scary. But I think what makes Backrooms so scary is just how brightly lit it is, like a retail setting. There's just something about that adds so much to this aesthetic. The Backrooms themselves are terrifying. They're like uncanny valley where it's like there's something right about it, but there's also something so wrong about it. And I think, aside from the camera work itself and the two good performances, I think the Backrooms itself, that set piece, is absolutely the star of the show. So eventually you have him bring in his assistant manager, bring in a coworker, and, you know, he pays them to come in with their camera so he can get this documented. Because this is set in the 90s, so no smartphones. So, you know, we have this couple of young kids come into the Backrooms with him. And this is where we get our first bit of, oh shit. Because the one kid, they tie like a bungee rope around him. He goes down this slope, this descent into another room. Comes back up because he sees something in the shadows. Gets pulled back down. And that is where we get Clark going down to try to find him. You get this tense-ass scene with a Christmas tree that I won't spoil. Beyond that, he finds his assistant manager behind this like see-through glass, but it kind of works like one-way glass, right? She can see him, he can't see her. Something comes up behind him, picks up the camera and starts recording him. Great choice. She warns him, he turns around, cut to black. This is when we kind of go back into the therapist stuff. We explore more of Mary with her childhood trauma, how much her mom really fucked up her psyche, and then she goes to find our protagonist in the Backrooms, because he is cleverly, like, he set up, like, this taped doorway so people know where to get in and get out. So she goes into the Backrooms, and we kind of see the same thing we saw with him in the first half of, like, her, like, holy fuck, exploring this new area that seems very alien. She stumbles upon Clark. He comes up behind her. She trusts him. Obviously, she has no reason not to trust him. But because it's been a set amount of time that we don't know, he's kind of descended into madness. He's losing his mind in this place, puts her in a chokehold, ties her up at this table, feels very family Texas Chainsaw Massacre, feels very Resident Evil 7, and you see that this dude has fully kind of lost his marbles. Like, he is set in this Backrooms. He would rather live here than in his own reality. Again, very Expedition 33. But this dude goes nuts. You kind of learn what these people were that were following them around. And they're kind of variants of humans, but it's like the Backrooms have been creating these humans. So it's almost like incestual, where, you know, people within the family sleeping together, you're going to get more birth defects. You're going to get things that aren't quite right. You have this one guy with like 3 sets of eyes. Super creepy. You have this lady with like 2 faces. So that stuff worked really well. But then you get the reveal of Clark's trauma. And his character in the furniture store is like this pirate. So his trauma is manifested as like this 9-foot pirate version of him with his eyes bulging. And it just wasn't scary. Actually kind of took me out of the scare. It was almost on the lines of like the creature at the end of Smile, the big titted lady in Barbarian, which I love that movie. But those creature designs kind of took me out a little bit. This is the same way. This monster just didn't do it for me personally. And it's one of those things about horror where, unfortunately, horror has such a hard time sticking the landing. Third act of this movie, for me, was rough to get through. Maybe not everybody agrees with that, but it wound up being a film by the end that leaves you with more questions than answers. And not like in the fun way where you can add your own lore to what you think is happening, but kind of in an annoying way, like an infuriating way, where you're like, okay, well, this kind of doesn't make sense. Like, what was the point of this movie? Why did that happen? Why did this happen? That doesn't add up. And, you know, some people will say, well, that's the point. The ending is supposed to leave you as confused as when you were going through the back rooms. I get what you're saying, but I don't really buy that. I think they just kind of picked a bad ending here. And, you know, other arguments are that, well, this picks up in the middle of his Backrooms, like, series, so you're not supposed to have answers. And okay, if they're setting up sequels where they're gonna dive into it more, but, you know, if that is your excuse, I think it's a weird place to pick up in this universe, in the middle of the series. Because, like I said, it doesn't give you the answers you're looking for, and it kind of frustrates you leaving the theater. Basically, this is a film that is, like a lot of films today, it's exploring mental health issues. Obviously, he has a ton of issues with anger, with deflecting blame. You know, he's one of these typical, I pay for the house, I pay the bills, woman, I pay for your school, so you should be more grateful for me. Her trauma is obviously mainly because of her mom, like, dumping her trauma onto her daughter. So, you know, it's an exploration of mental health, which a lot of movies do now. I don't want to say I'm getting tired of the mental health thing, but maybe I'm getting a little exhausted of it. But overall, guys, a great setup, a great premise that didn't quite deliver for me. Left more questions unanswered than actual answers we got. Some good performances, some great camera work. Like I said, I think the camera work is the star of the show here. But just a movie that ultimately left me disappointed. And I'm not trying to put this on the obsession scale, but with how much I adore that movie, this being the next one after it kind of hurts it a little bit. But I am going to give The Backrooms a 7 out of 10. I think it's still worth seeing. I just think they could have handled the third act in a more satisfying way. Alright guys, but that is going to do it for my complete unscripted thoughts on The Backrooms. I normally write up an entire script here, but I'm just leaving the theater. This one's just coming off the top of the dome. I had thoughts that I wanted to share. Man, like most horror movies, it's just that third act. And as always, guys, if you enjoyed this one, please let me know. Please let the YouTube algorithm know by leaving a like and dropping a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of The Backrooms, especially if you're a fan of the YouTube series. I would be very interested to hear a different perspective there, because maybe a lot more things made sense that I'm just unaware of. So let me know down below in the comments, and if you've seen both Backrooms and Obsession, let me know which one you preferred, because I have seen comments of people liking Backrooms actually more than Obsession. And as always, we will see you in the next one.